We also have another eminent dignitary with us, Dr. Sultan Hafiz Rahman. Dr. Sultan Hafiz Rahman is serving as the Executive Director of the BARC Institute of Governance and Development, BARC University, Bangladesh. Dr. Rahman is leading the restructuring program of BIGD and is actively involved in the research and academic matters, especially on the governance and public policies of the institute. He is also an ex officio member of the BIGD Advisory Council. He started his professional career in Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies in the year 1975 and joined the Asian Development Bank in September 1992. He retired from Asian Development Bank as Director General South Asia in the year June 2012, which was he was the only Bangladeshi who served the international organization at a senior most position. So he's a we are really privileged to have you in our midst, sir. So I request sir to throw some light on the global practices of social science research and how Bangladesh is trying to address the issues of social science research in Bangladesh, sir.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. Professor Mishra, it's an absolute delight to have been invited to this August conference. I feel privileged to be among so many dignitaries and outstanding researchers. I thought I would beat away a little bit from the track and tell you the story of Bangladesh. It's of course related to social science research. This brings together a great body of research that has gone on as to what happened to this country, which was so famously dubbed in 1972 by Henry Kissinger as a basket case. It probably as countries, developing countries go, it was probably among one of those which faced some of the most difficult odds and challenges at the time of its birth. And many despaired about its future, including the international community, which of course has consistently supported Bangladesh in its effort to transform itself, along with its many other friends in the south. And what has happened to Bangladesh since its birth, especially in the last 20-25 years, is now known as the Bangladesh paradox. This is how the World Bank has characterized it. Others say it's a Bangladesh surprise. Whatever it may be, let me share. It's a long story. I'll try. In some cases, I'm going to go very quickly. In other cases, I will pause to add accent to what I portray on the screen. But please bear with me. This is a much talked about subject. And now, in fact, as I speak, the UN Development Committee is meeting to discuss Bangladesh's graduation from being among the one of the least developed countries to becoming a middle-income country. And as early as 2018, we may actually be moved up the ladder, which means another set of huge challenges to face. So let's see how what this story is. Let me start in the first part by telling you about highlighting for you the developments that have taken place by way of transforming the economic and social landscape of the country. And one of the first actually to talk about the social development and the changes in Bangladesh was no less than one of its greatest sons. We claim both Rabindranath Tagore and Professor Amartya Sen jointly. So it was Professor Sen actually who first started highlighting this issue of how much social development had taken place in Bangladesh. So if we start with the basket case idea of Bangladesh being the largest importer of food in 1972, it imported 3 million tons of food grain, more than perhaps any other country has ever imported. Today, the per capita food availability increase somewhat despite the fact that Bangladesh has more than doubled its population, and it has lost exactly, to be exact, 19% of its arable land between 1971 December, when it was liberated with our allies, the Indian armed forces, to 2015. The share of agriculture, this is one of the biggest litmus tests, that agriculture actually becomes less and less important as the economy matures and manufacturing typically becomes the larger player in both growth, output and employment. But if you look at agriculture, see that in 1972, 75% of Bangladesh's GDP came from agriculture. Today, it only supplies 18% of the total GDP. Employment in agriculture fell from 80% to 40%. You can see that agricultural real wages, another big test of rural prosperity, over 2 decades have risen very sharply. I thought I already have a lot of numbers on this slide, so I won't give you the numbers. But the stark reality is today Bangladesh agriculture actually faces a labor shortage. And this labor shortage is actually, let me control it from here perhaps. The labor shortage is actually, in many cases, the argument is that maybe we have hit the so-called Lewis turning point. In other words, the infinite supplies of labor which could be drawn from agriculture to industry in order to develop the modern sector is not going to happen anymore. There will be more and more, it will become more and more costly to do something like that. In other words, there is quite clearly a shortage of labor which is driving mechanization in agriculture, which is quite visible these days. It is very, actually, I have to say that there may be very few countries in the world which at such low levels of per capita income have actually faced this situation of labor shortage in the traditional sector. So Bangladesh has enjoyed a steady per capita income growth. Let me just go. Steady per capita income growth of between 5.5 to 7% in the last 20 years. This is in real terms. And this is GDP growth, not per capita, I'm sorry. And if you go to the next slide, you will see that most certainly something happened in around 1990-95 actually, and from there the per capita income has really taken off, and the most recent figures are actually closer to $1,500 per capita. So for a country which has moved from, this is in constant prices, but imagine that we moved from $100 in nominal terms, $100 per capita income in 1972 to today more than $1,500 per capita income. In per capita terms also you can see, again this is a litmus test, that it is really the per capita income, because population is rising, it's not good enough for the GDP to just be growing. You can see the sharp rise after 1990 actually. And what happened in 1990 is that the country became a parliamentary democracy was restored, and it had a dramatic impact on the indicators that you will see, not only that is already visible here, but you will see later on pretty soon. Democracy has meant a great deal to Bangladesh. It has meant that inclusion, it really took off in the country. Okay, I shall have more to talk about it later. Yes, yes. Let's skip this. Well, one of the big issues is gross domestic savings. This has been a big debate in India, in the Indian economic growth model. Domestic savings transition, normally every country if you look at Southeast Asia and East Asia, you will see that every country that has grown has experienced what Danny Roderick has called the saving transition, which means a sudden jump in the saving rate by up to 5%. But you can see that throughout its history, Bangladesh did not actually experience that and has grown despite it. Next. A steady increase in fixed capital formation, investment, and I think this is what has contributed enormously to the growth that indicators that we have been looking at before. We can go to the next slide. You can see how dramatically poverty fell, especially after 1990. You can see what has happened to the country. Poverty headcount ratios have gone from close to 80% to today. In fact, the most recent estimates are indicating that it has gone down below 30% to 28%. So dramatic really shift, especially in these last 2 decades, and within that in the last 1 decade. Next slide. Well, you can see now, I had heard noises about the garments industry. So here it is. What we have seen by way of structural transformation in the economy of Bangladesh is that labor moved from agriculture to industry, but industry is comprised of 2 parts, manufacturing and construction. In manufacturing, which is the traditional sort of growth model, which most of the industrialized countries and all of the Southeast Asian countries, that is the growth model that we have seen, is labor moved from agriculture to manufacturing. And here what we are seeing is that yes, labor did move from agriculture to manufacturing sector. but there was a very specific feature which actually was revolutionary, which is that this industry, actually 90% of its employment is female employment. So the active participation, the active labor force participation of women in the labor force increased dramatically, and this again after 1990 in particular. So there is, however, an issue here, which is that manufacturing, traditionally what Bangladesh inherited was a jute industry. Raw jute we used to export, and what we did not export, we made jute goods out of it. 85% of our export earnings came from jute goods. So jute has been basically replaced by garments. Paradoxically, despite all this growth, our industrial manufacturing base has not widened or broadened. It remains very undiversified, narrowly focused, narrowly based. This is a challenge that Bangladesh has to meet in the future. The other part of industry, construction, and this is something of a story to tell. If you look at the 80s, which many have described as the lost decade, actually a lot was happening, but it was not yet visible. The largest sector, the largest sectoral growth of any sector was actually experienced in rural infrastructure. And that, I think, set the stage for some of the later growth that we saw in the country. And so you have a situation where labor is moving not just to manufacturing but also to construction. And construction has played infrastructure, especially rural infrastructure, has played a major role in the growth of in the Bangladesh story. And both manufacturing and construction have been very labor-intensive industries for Bangladesh, and therefore, just the right kind of choice of technology for the country to follow. Next slide. Okay, here we have a commonality across South Asia, and this is actually typical of South Asia vis-a-vis almost any other country which has developed, including the East Asian and Southeast Asian models, which is that at low levels of income, the service sector has boomed, as opposed to the manufacturing sector, which is what we normally see in the social transformation or economic transformation in other countries. So, quite interestingly, in all the South Asian countries, we see that over half of the GDP is contributed by services at fairly low levels of per capita income. We can go to the next slide. Well, I'm simply sort of summing up here that in the external sector, the fact that we were able to make a smooth transition out of jute goods, the fact that we have the ready-made garments industry, which accounts for now 80% of our exports, the fact that migration out of the country, especially which began once again, it really took off in the 90s after the country transited to democracy or transited back to democracy, has been a huge stabilizer in the balance of payments accounts in the external sector. Today, $20 billion out of our uh, $100 billion exports actually comes from remittances. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So for the social indicators for which Bangladesh has made quite a name, is you can see that gross enrollment rates are very high in the country, 95% for both male and female. And in fact, female gross enrollment is a little bit higher than male gross enrollment rates. This is in both at the primary education level and at the secondary education level. So Bangladesh has been able to eliminate the gender, or achieve rather gender parity, and eliminate gender disparity in primary and secondary education. Next slide. Well, these are basically simply graphical representations of what I said, so we can go quickly through to the next slide. Government expenditure in education steadily rose, but we can see that after 2010 there's been a turn around. Not a happy sign, but we hope that this will be reversed once again. And this is where public policy and a lot of social science research needs to be brought to bear to continue to persuade Bangladesh that they need to keep investing in education, in primary and secondary education. These are some health indicators, and you can see once again steady rise in the sanitation facilities. Can we keep going? Next one. This is again one of the most telling stories about Bangladesh, that over a period of, what is that? Is it 1990? Yeah. This period of democracy, you can see how dramatically from 180, this is the under 5 infant mortality rate, it has gone down below 30. So very dramatic indeed. And the tendency is this is going further down. So here Bangladesh is actually quite high on the list of achievers among the developing countries. Next slide. Expenditure on health, it's rose, but once again we are seeing that it having hit about 3.2, it is coming down after 2010. Once again, we need a public policy which will reverse this trend. Next. So here is a summary, of basically what we have seen, that maternal mortality rates fell, infant mortality rates fell, that water and sanitation coverage have improved dramatically. So Bangladesh, as a result, actually, of all the previous slides that you saw, achieved the MDGs ahead of time among the developing countries. So the question is, and you will see in a minute, that we have and we continue to perform poorly on the governance front. So the major big question has become, does Bangladesh, can we go to the next slide? Does Bangladesh really, can we go to the next? Yeah. You can see what is happening to voice and accountability. It had only one upturn, but then it is going down again. Next. Political stability, I think we have been quite famous for this. It's because of the y-axis that you don't see the fluctuations as much as you would have after 2005. But we have a measure of political stability since 2006. Next. These are all indexes that I have taken from various publications. Once again, I mean, it's not a happy story. Next. The quality of regulation, I don't think much needs to be said about this. We simply haven't done too well. Even when we were at the top, we were ranked, among 22nd. I think that's the highest ranking we got among 160 countries. We can go to the next slide. Once again, we are seeing some improvement towards the tail end of this period in terms of the rule of law, but much leaves to be desired, and you can tell from the numbers in the y-axis that our ranking is still very low on these indicators. Corruption, endemic, widespread, very recalcitrant, difficult. It has been very difficult to combat this. And therefore, we keep appearing for the last almost 8-9 years, we have been among the 3 bottom countries in terms of controlling corruption. Press freedoms, similar. Let's go to the next. Illicit financial flows are rising. We can go to the next slide. Okay, I think, we do really have a paradox. You just saw how poor the governance indicators of Bangladesh are still. And yet, this is a country which is being cited as something of a model among countries that have transformed themselves from very low levels of income. And I am arguing, and this is the first time I think anyone is arguing, that the 1971 war played a major role in transforming our psyche as a country. And I believe that, and I'm actually doing the research now to show all of this. This has to be a multidisciplinary research. It's not pure economics at all. So the famous, sort of John F. Kennedy, when people see things and ask why, I see things and ask why not. I have taken a bit of that out of the Kennedy, famous Kennedy quote, and I am saying that we developed an attitude of can do. That a lot of things that we could not do, we do. We learned how to organize on a very large scale. Millions of people came out of their homes. We had women for the first time coming out in their hundreds of thousands to support the war effort. Some of them actually fought in the War of Liberation. We were able to make do with very little by way of when we were fighting the war. We were able to, literally live out the experience of what it means to sacrifice for one's ideals and for one's for a free country. All of these, I think, had a very powerful impact on the psyche of this nation. Next slide. Actually, the much maligned government and the indicators of governance that we saw, to me, are indicators which would, sort of be more relevant for a more mature sort of industrial democracy. So one has to perhaps take a more nuanced look at how we've so far measured the government effectiveness in particular. Uh, the government took population growth very seriously at the beginning at the time of its birth, and the result was that it launched a major campaign supported by largely by the United States and joined in by other donor countries later on, which had a dramatic effect on the fertility rates. And then, of course, we saw more and more the participation, female participation in the labor force, which also had a further dramatic effect. And today we are just above the replacement population rate, growth rate. So about 1.4, 1.5% is our crude population growth rate. Very low by a low-income country standards. So I would say that the government did a good job in this. This was good public policy. And I list a number of other factors which have had a major impact on the female fertility rates, which have helped Bangladesh stabilize it's not yet stabilized, but it has had a dramatic effect on the population. Yeah. Can we go to the very sort of, we can go one more slide. Yeah. Okay. So here I am basically listing all the actions that the government actually took, despite the fact that we probably don't pay that much attention to these. And this is what, and certainly my research has indicated, that all these had seminal impacts on the Bangladesh story. And if we go to the last statement, I think, is that this is probably not as much of a paradox as we think it is. The government did some good things. Most importantly, it allowed civil society a certain space, and civil society played a dramatic role, a very different role than it traditionally plays in democracies, which is that it became a deliverer of the last mile public services in the country, which is not a typical role of civil society. Okay, so I think the last word that I would have, can you please go to one of the last slides? Next. The next one. Next one. If there is a Bangladesh model, next slide, please. So if there is a Bangladesh model, I would say that that model consists of the following. So not its traditional role. Open up space for the private sector to innovate and come up with smart policies to support the public sector, the private sector. So these together, I would say, rural investment, educate your girls, open space for civil society, allow entrepreneurship to grow in the private sector. So these have combined, I think, to make Bangladesh what it is today. So that probably answers to me I don't know if it answers, at least it explains much better to me the paradox, so-called, that it has been. It has done very well, but it has many, many more challenges to come. Thank you for bearing with me. It was a long presentation.
Thank you very much, sir. We have with us Professor R.H. Deshpande. Professor R.H. Deshpande is currently Honorary Visiting Professor at Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. Professor Deshpande holds a PhD in economics. He worked as a faculty member at ISAC till 1988 and moved to Gokhale Institute of Political and Economics, Pune, as a reader in economics. At the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, he also worked as a registrar, and during his tenure, he brought a significant research grant to the institute. In 1998, he returned to ISAC to join as professor and head of Agriculture Development and Rural Transformation Center. Uh, he steered a mega project on farmers at Millennium and completed many research projects. And he also worked as a policy supporting academician in both the Government of Karnataka and Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. His areas of interest include agriculture, development policy, watershed management, political economy, WTO, agriculture and trade. I request sir to say few words on the conference.
Because few words are over, and I would pitch it to the audience. I am a cricket player and cricket fan. So when you take the ball in hand, you have to pitch it, and according to the pitch, you need to bowl. I see the pitch in front of me. I see their faces, and this is the pitch on which, if I have to bowl, I need to stick myself to social science research, the sustainability and the new paradigms. I would not be getting into too much of details. Time is a lot, and I know I don't want to test your patience, but I'll tell a few things. First thing is, we borrowed the concept of sustainability from resource sustainability or the commodity sustainability. The two things, we are talking in social science research about the ideas and something which is not necessarily a commodity. Now, sustaining the ideas, and if you take the Brundtland definition of sustainability, it doesn't apply here. It's something which is totally different, and therefore you need a different kind of look at sustainability. I was thinking of it, and I made it this way, that in any production process and in any research process, you have two things, positive externalities and negative externalities. You need to reduce or convert the negative externalities into positive. In any research, we have large amount of negative externality. Lot of our research has become repetitive. Lot of our research has become molded. Lot of our research has become mundane. Lot of our research has been exactly on the same lines, just change the name of the country or name of the state, and it will be the same. We need to get into the new path of research, and therefore we need to learn from the old paradigms to get into the new paradigms. If this new path of research, which means reducing those negative externalities and getting them to positive, I have gone through a lots of material, and I find that today, take for that matter any damn subject, climate change. A large number of fellows who work in climate change do not get into the basics of it and do not give any kind of incremental knowledge. The last sentence. What is that we need to take from here? And if at all I would have talked to you half an hour, 45 minutes, I'll give you the last sentence. That any of you would like to get into research, there is one question you ask to yourself. What is that incremental knowledge that I have added? And if you are able to answer to yourself that yes, I have added something which is incremental, which was not existing earlier, then you feel satisfied. Today I told you that if at all we are borrowing the definition of sustainability in research as a domain, then the negative externalities in the sense of repetitive research, molded research, mundane research, the research of the kind which even within few minutes one reads it. That has to be reduced. It has to be brought to positive externality. And how do you make it? You make it only out of thinking and incremental knowledge. Friends, I would not be speaking more because tomorrow again I have to speak. Apart from that, I am ready to listen to the other speakers who are coming after me. I must give them a very good chance. Thank you.